Hello and welcome to the final session in the business track of Vaccination Unites Us. We are now going to hear about how to communicate with clients outside of our clinic walls in the talk, Client Engagement and Vaccination in the Digital Age, how to communicate with and educate clients beyond your clinic walls. For those just joining, my name is Dr. Erica Carroll, and I am a veterinarian with the global marketing team focused on small animal vaccines at Merck Animal Health. A final reminder of our housekeeping items: notes for the talk will be emailed to you after the event, and should you experience any technical difficulties, please use the information at the bottom of your screen. I'm now excited to introduce our speaker, Dr. Susie Samuel. Dr. Samuel is the founder of Vets Digital, a veterinary specialist digital marketing agency, and founder and CEO of Vet Help Direct. A practicing veterinarian for over a decade, Dr. Samuel believes that easy access to veterinary advice means better welfare for animals. She has spoken at conferences all over the world on veterinary digital communications and how they can revolutionize veterinary care. Dr. Samuel, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me to present. So I'm going to be running through quite a practical session on how best to communicate with pet owners using digital. So we're going to start off by looking at just the wider context, why we should be doing this, what our aims are. And then we're going to look at what message is best to use when we're communicating with our clients around vaccination, which platforms we should be using, and then tactics. How do we actually get this up and running in a busy clinic? And then I'll just run through the key takeaways before we stop. So to introduce, as Erica said, we believe that better digital communication leads to better animal welfare. If there's low barriers to clients communicating with their vet, that vet's going to have more influence on the way they care for their pet, both in preventative healthcare and when that pet is sick, seeking out veterinary help in a timely fashion. So I'd just like to just share with you some keyword analysis. So this is from Google Trends, and it shows the number of people searching, this is humans searching for COVID-19. And you can see there how it correlates really closely with the number of vaccines administered. And I'm just showing you this firstly because it's fascinating, but secondly that the amount of digital interest in vaccination had such a strong correlation with the number of doses administered. Now obviously we don't know if that's correlation or causation, but it's certainly interesting. And then we can look, obviously we don't have the same data on number of doses administered, but what we can look at is the number of people searching for dog vaccine. And you can see there that increasing very much in line with how we saw demand increasing in veterinary practices, so increasing there in reaching a peak in sort of early 2021. And now they've returned much closer to historic levels, but still slightly higher. So all these people searching on Google, trying to find information about vaccination, and then we know from humans that that's important. It correlates with the likelihood of them actually having a vaccine. Human communication is evolving all the time, but obviously the recent 10, 15 years have seen a real revolution rather than an evolution in the way that we communicate. And now it's very unusual to really pick up the telephone to a friend, for example. Like, you're much more likely to send them a text or message, and everybody's instincts have become much more digital. And that includes the younger generations, but it also includes the older generations as well. Everyone has become more digitized. And so we know all these pet owners now, digital is like a normal way of life for them. We can see the volume of pet owners that are searching for vaccine related terms on Google. And unfortunately, the veterinary profession is not always winning the search results fight. So when you type in dog vaccines, this great opportunity to convert a client into getting their dog vaccinated, very often the information that they are going to see is not coinciding with what the veterinary message would be. So you can see here that this is in the UK, and obviously Google search results vary a bit depending on different settings. But for a search for dog vaccine pros and cons in the UK, the first result is actually an anti-vax result. So it's talking actually about the problems with dog vaccination. It's really interesting when you search for anti-vax search terms, human search terms, Google has filtered them all out. It's actually really hard to find on Google anti-vaccine content that comes through more through the social platforms. But that is not the case for pets. Google have not filtered anti-vaccine sentiment for humans. So these are all content. This is all content found on the top page of Google around vaccinations. So have you ever considered the possibility that dog vaccines do more harm than good? Why I don't vaccinate my dogs at all, a story. And then this comment here, we also seem to have a tremendous number of dogs with behavioural problems, largely due to over-vaccination and processed food. And the anti-vax, very compelling, very engaging content on TikTok, put together by people who really know how to engage with an audience. And this is from YouTube. So it's not just people saying, don't vaccinate your dog, there's nuances. And this over-vaccination seems to be a big theme that's obviously going to be quite detrimental, as well as this sort of straightforward, just don't vaccinate your dog. So as a profession, we need to do something about this. And what is the most effective message? So I just mentioned in the last slides that these people are producing content that's really engaging. It's very current. It's very, very easy for people to sit and watch it. So what sort of message should we be putting out there? So firstly, this is a bit of a veterinary joke and probably maybe a little bit UK specific, but in surgery in the UK, we have a saying that we're all taught at vet school, which is the solution to pollution is dilution, which basically means you need to flush wounds. Actually, there's a sort of similar thing. This sort of applies to in digital communications, which is that the more high quality, accurate information that we as a profession and an industry can produce, the more likely it is that more people will engage with our content. If we're not putting much content out there, then the voice of those people with non-evidence-based views is going to be, which many people find it very difficult to engage with. And this is sort of the opposite type of post. This is a very detailed science post, and that's fine as part of a mixture, because there are some people where this type of content is more influential. And the great thing about social media is it gives you this opportunity to be a regular, even a daily part of your client's life. And when you think back 10, 15 years ago, that would not have been the case. You'd have been lucky if they read your newsletter that you sent out once every quarter. So this is actually, you know, I've started off sort of negative, and really I'm just trying to explain why I think it's so crucial that we do this. But actually there's huge positives here in terms of communicating the benefits of vaccination. This is another example really of the type of post that I first showed you on Instagram. This is a TikTok version, and it's just a really a vet that's got a very friendly manner, just showing how pain-free it is for the cat to have his vaccination, how much the cat is enjoying having a little treat. And the vet's really engaging. And this video probably took 5 or 10 minutes to make, so really, really quick and easy. And it's creating those social norms. So that thing where if you sort of tell people that everybody else is doing something, and then they're much more likely to have enough confidence to go and do that thing for themselves. And then another thing is when we look at content from vets, we've had a lot of scientific training, and we have a tendency to carry that through into social media. So we will tend to write posts that myth bust, that call on evidence, that sort of talk about the facts in detail. But actually, for a lot of owners, it's stories that really resonate powerfully. So telling a story about one of your clients about their pets is often much more engaging and powerful than giving lots of scientific facts. Vaccination amnesties are very popular in the UK. This is the concept of restarting lapsed vaccinations at no additional cost. So instead of charging extra for the 2 vaccinations, I'm just charging the normal price. And these methods of reducing barriers, so just thinking what's putting off my clients into getting their pet vaccinated? Is there a way that I can remove that factor that's putting them off? And vaccination amnesties are a great way to do that. And social media is a really good way to basically advertise that message that you're offering a vaccination amnesty, to nudge your owners into just finally getting around, especially making it time limited. So they think, oh, I must, do that now. I can't put it off. So we've talked a bit about which messages to use. So I'm now going to look in a bit more detail about which platforms to use. So in terms of social, we've done as Vets Digital a huge number of surveys since 2015, surveying pet owners on their online behaviour. We had access to data on what the population in general was doing on social media, but we didn't know how pet owners specifically behaved, if they were exactly the same as normal or if they had any slight differences. So this was the end of 2021. We surveyed just over 1,000 pet owners. And one of the really interesting things that came out of this particular survey was the number of social media platforms that people are using. So you can see Gen Zs and millennials there using nearly 5 social media platforms on average per person. That does go down with age, but you can see even the over 55s are actually on average using more than 2 social media platforms. So this is a bit of a challenge, because it means that actually, or an opportunity, depending on the way you want to look at it, you might need to think about more than one social platform. So very interestingly as well, that now this is a year-ish out of date, but Facebook is still the most popular social media platform for pet owners, really by quite some distance, although you can see that the 18 to 34-year-old behaviour is so it also, I think the other advantage of Facebook is that you're on Facebook as a real person with a real location. And so if our vets put an hour into digital marketing and they concentrate that hour on Facebook, typically they will get more out of it than if they focus that hour, for example, on Twitter, where you could end up interacting with a lot of pet owners that are in America or Australia. So we always recommend to vets that Facebook and Instagram are really good places to start, and they're set up so that you can actually post between them really easily. You can see the rise of these video-related social platforms like YouTube and TikTok, and they're going to become more and more important as those millennials and Gen Zers become more and more of a higher proportion of our client base. So you don't need to be on all platforms, and you shouldn't try to, because I think one of the problems is if you try to achieve too much, it can actually be off-putting. So you need a manageable social media strategy. So most clinics should be considering Facebook and Instagram as a minimum. And then if you have anybody in the practice that's got a particular interest in any of the other platforms, then they can be helpful too. One of the other social platforms that a lot of our vet practices use now, and we encourage them in, is LinkedIn. And that's really in terms of recruitment rather than digital communications with pet owners. But just as an aside, that's quite an interesting trend as well. So reminders are really, we couldn't do a talk on vaccinations compliance without talking about reminders. They are a very reliable way to improve vaccination compliance, and they will make a measurable difference on the number of dogs and cats that are having vaccinations in your clinics. So which reminder system to use? Many practice management systems have their own native reminder systems, and there are also several third-party systems that exist that offer reminders via email, SMS, or WhatsApp. So have a look at the market there. But in all honesty, I'd probably make this my first priority if I am not doing reminders and I wanted to improve the sort of compliance rate of vaccinations amongst my clients. I think I would definitely start with reminders. So now looking at messaging. So we surveyed in this survey that we did at the end of November, we asked the pet owners what their preferences for contacting the vet was. And you can see that phone wins. So this score is, the higher the score, the more people wanted to use it, but owners could choose more than one method of contacting the vet. And what's very interesting is when you see how many clients would like to be able to text message and email their vet. Now, a lot of vet practices are using email, which is great. When you look at the sort of sum of all of those people that would like to use either live chat, email, Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, or text, it's very, very significant. And going back to my point that I made earlier, if you think about contacting a friend, it's actually like a lot of the time you wouldn't think to call them. And there are some of my friends that if they phoned me, I'd be sort of shocked and imagine that something was wrong with them because I'm so used to receiving texts from them because it's more convenient. And the reason for that is because it's asynchronous. So when the phone rings, you have to drop everything that you're doing that second and answer the phone. And that's why it can almost feel rude sometimes. And that is much more operationally efficient. It's really operationally inefficient to drop what you're doing to deal with a phone call. The other problem with synchronous communications is that it can be frustrating for the owners. So they can end up waiting on the phone on hold for a long time. And when we think about something like vaccination compliance, what we should be aiming for is to actually reduce every barrier that we can to make it as easy as possible for people to book a vaccination and reduce the friction in them doing that. And when we think about the impact that reducing friction can have, I think it's always sort of sobering to think of Amazon, because the only difference between Amazon and other online retailers is that it's always been that tiny bit easier to do business with them. They've just made it 1 or 2 less clicks to check out than other online retailers. And that tiny, tiny difference in friction has resulted in the sort of business booming in a way that other businesses haven't. So if you then extrapolate that to our vet practices and you think of somebody, oh yes, I think I ought to vaccinate my pet, and then thinking, oh, I'm going to be waiting on hold for 8 minutes or 9 minutes, I'll do it tomorrow. And you can see how that friction could put off people from getting their pets vaccinated and could reduce the number of vaccinated pets in your clinic. So this is the same graph, but looking at millennial and Gen Z pet owners. And you can see here that actually WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger and text message, even more popular than amongst the over 35s. So this is going to become more and more important. And really, I would say a basic fundamental requirement of doing business in the next 5 years. So you'll notice the reference to WhatsApp there. And that does vary on country. It's quite interesting. So some countries have very low uptake of WhatsApp. So Australia there on 32%, the United States on 41%. But many of the European countries and India having incredibly high levels of WhatsApp penetration there. And that evolution towards messaging platforms, you know, when you think of that, like 99% of people there using WhatsApp in Brazil, yeah, it's very, very significant usage. We've got 71% of people using it in the United Kingdom, and it certainly feels like, I would say, more than that. And then that evolution towards a messaging platform is happening everywhere, but not in always quite the same way in each country. So it seems to be that either Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp, if we sort of exclude Russia and China, are the chat platforms that are sort of taking over. And it's quite interesting the way that distributes over the world. But in your country, there will be a messaging platform that's popular, and I'm sure that you'll know exactly which one it is without having to look it up, just from your sort of knowledge of what everybody's using. Now, the interesting thing with messaging platforms is that they are much more engaging. So this is our data. This is from 400,000 conversations that our vet practices have had on WhatsApp and on SMS. So the 400,000 is that combined. And you can see here, we were expecting a difference in engagement rate, but we were quite astounded by the scale of this, that if you send a message by SMS, 11% of people reply. And if you send instead the message by WhatsApp, 70% of people reply. So vast differences in engagement rate. I think SMS is becoming a little bit less used over the last few years. I think the way it's used for two-factor authentication and delivery notifications, it becomes quite a boring area of your phone, whereas your messaging platform, whether it's WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger, is where your friends and family are. We don't have data on the engagement rates of Facebook messaging yet, but we are anticipating that it will be a similar picture where the Facebook messages are much more engaging than the SMS. So it will be interesting to see if that's the case. And this is just like a sort of just to show you, when your vet's message can land on WhatsApp, it's right up there with your friends, your mum, and your best mate. So we've been using WhatsApp messaging with vet practices. We've been enabling vet practices to use WhatsApp messaging, I should say, for just over a year now. And we can see enormous growth in the number of conversations and the volume of payments that clients are making over Apple Pay links sent via WhatsApp or Google Pay. So this, I think, just shows the real appetite of pet owners to be able to contact their vet with asynchronous communication, lowering those barriers, making communication easier, and then all the benefits of vaccination that come with that. So this Yvette here, who's a veterinary care assistant, is just pointing out that often clients aren't allowed to talk on the phone when they're at work, but they can send a message about their dog. So they can send a quick message asking a question about vaccination and just getting rid of all those barriers and getting that appointment booked. Don't forget email when you're thinking about communicating with your clients about vaccination. It's still very much alive and kicking. Most of our vet practices will see an open rate of about 40% when they send an email out, which in other industries is absolutely unheard of. And it's forecast to grow, email. It's not going anywhere. Email is excellent for sending out marketing awareness type messages around vaccination. It's less useful for clients being able to ask quick questions about vaccination that might get in the way of them booking an appointment. So really a combination of email and messaging. So now content. What are we actually going to put into these messages? So you can see that search volumes of vaccinations are high, and I showed you some more evidence of that earlier on. And it's really important to make sure that as a veterinary profession, veterinary practices, national organisations, professional organisations are all investing in content to make sure that we rank highly in these search engines. So for the potentially 100,000 people every month that are searching for cat vaccination, we want to make sure that there's a lot of good evidence-based content in the results when they do that search. Local search volumes are significant. So this is for Southampton, a relatively large city in the UK. And you can see there's between 100 and 1,000 fairly non-specific people searching for dog vaccinations near me. So making sure that in that case, it's the clinic, making sure that the clinic is coming up rather than anyone with non-evidence-based views on vaccination. And the best way to do that is to have good content on your website. So most practice websites will get thousands of views a month, and having some really good information on vaccinations is a good way to make sure that you're getting your message across. I would say, remember the sort of messages about how to communicate that we discussed earlier. It doesn't necessarily want to be a lot of hard facts and sort of densely packed information. It's better to sometimes tell a story, show pictures of cats happily receiving vaccinations, and so you can make sure you've got a variety of content there. Just a quick word on apps. Apps have a place, and they're very good for the clients that are most engaged and bonded with your practice. So the sort of 20% most engaged clients will love having an app. However, do not try to funnel all your clients through it. There's a lot of evidence now that particularly millennials, Gen Zers, extremely frustrated if they are forced into downloading an app just to do something simple like book an appointment, message you, ask a quick question about vaccination. So now tactics. This is really sort of the pragmatic tricks that we've learned on how to actually get things up and running, because you're so busy being vets, and it's really hard to carve out the time to do digital, and sometimes it can feel really overwhelming. So I'm just going to give you some quick pointers as to how you can fit this in. So first of all, plan what your vaccination message is going to be. So that's separate to the platform. What are you going to be talking about? What are you going to be trying to say? How are you going to communicate that message? Is it going to be in images, video? Are you going to use stories about people that have come into your practice? And then how does reminders fit into that as well? So for education, you probably want to be thinking as a minimum about Instagram, Facebook, and your website. Email can do both of those. And then for reminders and chats about vaccination, you want to be thinking Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, or SMS. So this is a bit of an overwhelming diagram. So we've broken down sort of what a digital communication strategy on vaccination should look like. So all of the things you might want to do to cover search, reminders, email, social, and messaging. And we've mapped all of that out for you. Now, obviously, there isn't enough time to go into all of these different aspects in enough detail in this talk. But if you'd like to contact us at Vets Digital, we would be very happy to provide all of our information that we have on around all of these different topics. So I'm going to zoom in on what I would do first, and we consider to sort of be the fundamentals. So search, making sure that you come up on Google is fundamental. You really want to make sure that your vet practice is there when people are searching for information about dog vaccines. And there's three aspects to that we're going to focus on here: having a blog, what content you've got on your website, and Google My Business. And then social. So, and then we're going to look at three areas, probably not the most basic things, but the areas where we see vet practices sort of missing out. So ads, content, and then how to do video editing. And then we're also going to look at agencies, because I think these are a very important part of planning digital in a vet practice. I'm slightly biased there, but I do think that pragmatically it's important to realise that you don't have all the time in the world. So Google actually is not as clever as people sometimes think it is. And really all it's doing is matching words that people type into Google with words that are on your website. So making sure that you have the words like dog vaccination, cat vaccination on your website is really important. Just another interesting aside, people don't search for pet vaccination. So if everything is pet and you're never talking about dogs and cats, you're kind of missing out there. Google keyword tool, just Google it, is a great way to discover which keywords people are Googling and therefore you should have on your website. And then if you write a blog, what you'll end up doing is you'll end up writing lots of long sentences that might just match exactly what somebody types into Google, and then your website should come up very highly ranked. So those are the three tips. And just another thing as well is that, going back to the point of Google not being all that clever in some ways, is that if you're a very friendly vet practice, Google is not going to know that unless you have friendly vets written on your website. So you do have to hammer home anything that's good about yourself on your website. Google My Business is an often overlooked aspect of local search for your vet practice. And actually, for local businesses, Google My Business is probably more important than normal search. And yet, a lot of SEO, search engine optimization companies will not focus on it because they're not used to local search. So make sure that you've claimed your Google My Business profile and that you've added again the words dog vaccination and cat vaccination and your health plan information in there, and you've put as much information as you can in there, and then you keep it up to date. And then this is some tips and tricks for generating content for social. I think everyone's had that experience of sitting there and thinking, I really should post something on social media, but just having a bit of a blank brain as to what to post. So first tip, use the whole team. So set up a private WhatsApp group, Facebook group. You don't have to trust the whole team to actually post on your behalf on Facebook, but you can ask them to send any ideas they have for content, and you'll find 99% of what they suggest is really would work. Use a mix of stories, that thing we've been really talking about all the way through this presentation, different styles of content, stories, promotions, lots of pictures. And then make sure you engage. So when people reply to your post, try and reply back to them. It's really good for making sure that your content is seen by more people. Like people's content. Try and start conversations if you can. So rather than posting something that's like just a statement, try turning it into a question. How did your pet feel when he came in to be vaccinated? And then generate that conversation will be much better for getting your content seen. Make sure you understand what your brand looks like and what you're trying to portray, and then make sure that all of your posts fit in with that brand identity. Canva is a great secret tool that we use to very easily create a lot of content. And then coming back to that thing, an agency, people to help you who specialize and do nothing but creating good content, so that you can spend more of your time doing the vetting. Industry partners, often a great source of content. So just ask if they have any content, if your vaccine provider has any content for you to use on social, and they'll probably have a whole raft of different posts for you to use. Few tips on creating videos. Capture the viewer's interest in the first few seconds. Make sure that the video makes sense if people have got the volume turned down, so you want to have subtitles. And make it sure it's like an engaging story or storytelling. And then very important that it's short, to generally under a minute. This is another thing that a lot of vet practices miss, is the paid social. So this is paying to promote your content on social. And it's kind of essential nowadays. If you don't have paid social, you'll find you're producing lots of content and it doesn't get seen, or it only gets seen by a fraction of your client base or your local pet owners. And that really becomes a false economy. It's very easy to undervalue the time that you have put into creating that content. So for you to go and create a lot of content and then not pay for it to be seen is a false economy. So a few very quick guidance. This is a very complex area, paid social, and again, something you might want to consider enlisting the help of an agency with, or somebody in your team that has an interest in it. Make sure you target really carefully. If you're paying for someone to see your message, you really want to make sure that they're a relevant person, so a local pet owner or a client. And then when you've targeted it, create different content depending on who you're targeting. So for example, if you're targeting dog owners, don't show them a cat, and vice versa. So I've said this a few times, and I consider using a digital agency. Obviously, we are vets. I'm the founder of Vets Digital, and therefore have a biased view, you could argue. But actually, there's digital vet specialist digital marketing agencies in almost every market. So Genius Vets in the US, Pet Pack over in Australia. And as I say, these people can support you, so you can still produce content from your practice, but they just do the heavy lifting and the legwork for you. And with their experience, they make sure that the time that you're putting into it, it actually gets exposure of the content. So very worthwhile considering if you haven't already. So in conclusion, we really need to make sure that the vet voice is heard effectively. There's some really good content out there from veterinary organisations, but we cannot be complacent. We need to be continually advocating for vaccination and the evidence-based view online. And we need to ensure that that is in a palatable format for clients, that we're not just talking science at people, that we're talking to them in engaging and up-to-date ways, and that can be drip-fed to clients. There are so many options and it would be easy to feel overwhelmed, but the most important thing is just to get started, even if it's in a very narrow or small way. So please do email. We're very happy to give out. We've got a lot of resources on using digital effectively. So susie@vetsdigital.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Samuel, for showing us the importance of why veterinarians should be participating in the digital space and a nice overview on how that can be done. We would now like to take some questions on this topic. Our first question is, if you answer client questions digitally, is there concern that clients will stop coming to the clinic?
That's a really good question, and one that we get asked a lot. And it tends to be a concern for people before they start using digital communications, but once they've started, it doesn't tend to be too much of an issue. So I think firstly, when you start using or offering asynchronous messaging to your clients, you are actually digitizing client communications. And when you digitize anything, it's a really big change. And that really big change is good in that it results in very profound time savings and very profound changes in process for the vet practices and efficiency. So some of the vets that are using asynchronous messaging talk about saving 1 to 2 hours a day of time as a team. However, with any big change, you do need to plan that change. There's often extra training that's required. And I think vet practices have, by and large, spent quite a lot of time thinking about how they're going to handle that same problem over the phone. So when people ring up asking for advice over the phone, how are they going to avoid giving out free advice and that preventing people from coming in? And there's a lot of different tactics. Different clinics have their own policies, and really the same applies to digital messaging. So it's really important to just work out what you think people should say, how they should approach it. The advantage of digital is that you can have templated messages, so you can use the same template again and again, so you can have a little bit more influence over how your team are talking to clients, the language that they're using, so that can be really helpful. And another thing that people worry about before they start using asynchronous messaging is that clients will be in touch with them all the time and almost sap their team's time having to deal with sort of silly questions. But actually what we find is that each conversation that comes in digitally would have been a phone call had they not had that offer for asynchronous messaging. So actually what you're doing is reducing the phone calls and reducing all the stress that comes with that. And with the when people are finding it's much quicker and easier to answer an asynchronous message, and you don't get dragged into a lot of conversation around other problems or other pets, you're able to stay pretty focused on that conversation, which can end up being time saving as well.
Thank you, Dr. Samuel. We had a question regarding team members getting involved in social media. The question is, how do you ensure that team members will say the right thing when posting to social media?
Well, that's a really good question, and there are so many advantages to getting all of the team members involved in your particularly social media, because what you find is that you then benefit from all of the combined creativity of the team, and not only that, but all their eyes on different social media platforms, seeing different posts, seeing different ideas of content to share, taking photos in the waiting room or of inpatients. So getting the team involved is definitely a positive thing. However, you don't necessarily want to give your whole team the access to be able to post as your vet practice on social media, because obviously things like spelling mistakes, grammatical errors, perhaps the wrong tone of voice can be very sort of damaging and detrimental. So what we would recommend is setting up a private Facebook group or a WhatsApp group where when team members have ideas or they've taken photos, they can share it to that private group. And then the two people, you can choose a few people that you trust who are allowed to post onto the directly onto the social platforms as the vet practice can then write the posts. Another really good tip is to have a system of proofing. So to have someone to write the social media proof and then to have other team members to check it. So within Vets Digital, all the content that we write, for example, goes through 2 rounds of proofing. One is clinical proofing, so it will be checked by a veterinarian or a technical person. And then the second round of proofing is for grammar, spelling, being on brand, tone of voice, that type of thing. So pragmatically, what you'd want to do is either have a spreadsheet of all of your posts before they go live, or to schedule them and for somebody to check them before they actually are published. So we would really recommend that. And then don't forget the tools that can help you. So things like Grammarly or even just basic spell check on your computer are great ways of making sure that that content is okay. When you're thinking about sort of rules around posting, don't forget rules around images as well. It's very easy to post images that are not on brand or can actually cause problems. So firstly, making sure that you've actually got copyright for all of the images that you, or not copyright, that you've got the permission to post any photos of pets that you use, so permission from the owner written. And secondly, that those photos fit in with the brand image you want to portray for the brand. So, for example, most vet practices that we work with, we advise them not to have pictures of anaesthetized animals, not to have any pictures that show blood, so bloody swabs, anything like that. A really, really bad idea to associate with your brand because it can seem really horrifying for pet owners. And also what your policy is on brachycephalics and everything around that.
Thank you, Dr. Samuel. One final question is, our clinic is very busy and not in need of additional clients or client requests to manage. Should we still implement some of these ideas? And if so, which would you recommend starting with?
Again, in the UK, this is something that's been quite common over the last couple of years, and particularly with all the COVID restrictions, meaning everything is very time consuming and vet practices being unable to take on new clients. And many of our clinics would have waiting lists. The most proactive and forward-thinking vet practices that we work with have continued to use digital very strongly all the way through that. Because they recognise how important that is in its role of ensuring good animal welfare of the patients that are under its care. So as we talked about earlier, digital communications aren't just about getting new clients at all. It's about making sure that your existing owners provide the right care for their pets. And having that, once you've sort of taken the effort in building that digital relationship, it's a great way then to be able to publish messages on updates, like, for example, if the practice was closed or doing curbside consulting or people needed to wear a mask, those practices that have focused on digital communications and were able to get that message across really effectively and quickly. So lots of operational benefits there as well. And then it's also about building, maintaining that demand, maintaining care. So the most forward-thinking vet practices actually continued to market during these busy times, but they created a waiting list. So that when they had the availability, they then had an immediate stream of new clients ready to come on board, rather than having put out more off-putting messages. So in terms of what to focus if you're in that situation, focus on communicating with your existing clients. So focus on the email marketing, focus on making sure that you've got a blog on your website, updating people on how things are going. Focus on Facebook ads, but maybe target them at people that like your page rather than people that are in the local area. Then making sure that you're available and that there's no barriers. And that has the nice side effect of increasing operational efficiency for the teams. So the asynchronous messaging and making sure that it's really easy for owners to ask any questions they've got, particularly important if there might be a delay from when they want to see the vet to when the vet practice can actually fit them in. So the asynchronous communication is becoming really, really crucial in that scenario. Practices taking payments, so taking payments of vaccines ahead of the appointment, so that if the clients don't show up, they're protected against that. But also putting people off not showing, because obviously time in the clinic becomes so precious when you're oversubscribed. If there's a no-show, then that's really sort of detrimental to the flow and efficiency of the clinic.
Many thanks again, Dr. Samuel, for all the information and tips on how we can reach our clients beyond our clinic walls. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Many thanks to all for your attendance in this track. Participation certificates will be emailed after the event. It does conclude our business track, but we look forward to seeing you next at our keynote address. Goodbye.